Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we can see and hear you. Good afternoon, Mr. Todd. Can we turn to the issue of bugs, errors and defects? You addressed this important issue in paragraphs 77 to 79 of your witness statement, which is WITN 0388 0100 at page 26. Thank you. Page 26 and 27. Thank you. And you see the cross-heading bugs, defects and other issues.
Yes.
And if we just look at 78, please. You say during the monthly board meetings, we would have reviewed the total outstanding number of bugs, their priority, and also a general description of what they were. We were assured through our governance and oversight processes that the fixes for these were being handled appropriately. The technical team was experienced in both diagnostics and resolving these issues. What was your governance and oversight process, or what were your governance and oversight processes so far as they related to fixes?
So there's a team within ICL Pathway focused on the management under John Bennett. It had a full management team, including a technical director, a project manager, operations director, quality assurance manager, and the processes would operate within ICL Pathway, and matters as shown in the board report were escalated to the board, or the board was briefed on the progress of clearing the significant software issues.
How were any resolutions monitored and reported to you?
Just through the board, from my recollection.
So, I'm sorry?
Just through the board meetings, through my recollection.
And so was there a tracking system operated by the board itself to see what had happened to past resolutions or fixes of bugs, errors and defects?
There was a process, as I recall, within ICL Pathway that kept track of all bugs and issues raised.
I'm thinking more at board level, at the board meeting of ICL Pathway.
Other than as presented through the board reports, I don't recall any other process other than as reported by the executive team of ICL Pathway.
Who on the board, if anyone, had technical knowledge in terms of the issue of bugs, errors and defects?
I am at the moment just trying to recall who the other players were on the board.
So Mr. Bennett as the managing director?
Well, good boy. His background was in sales and marketing rather than technology.
Mr. Christou, legal and commercial?
Correct. You do remind me of one correction to what I recall writing, which was there was no Fujitsu director. From reviewing a document over the weekend that I was given last Thursday, reminded me that Kurokawa-san, a Fujitsu board member with technical knowledge, was appointed at that time, but that was after the renegotiation with the post office.
And so, can you recall at these board meetings, anyone with technical expertise being brought into the meeting to explain to you the process of clearing bugs, errors and defects, or what was the cause of the bugs, errors and defects?
So, firstly, I don't recall any specific situation, but would have highly likely been representation from the Pathway team. Now, separate from the Pathway team, ICL's structure also did have a CTO, Andrew Boswell. I don't recall, it's a long
CTO meaning?
Chief Technology Officer.
Yes.
I don't recall any specific involvement, but the Pathway was not a walled garden. There would have been almost certainly conversations going on about the technical aspects. And I'm sure when you talk to John Bennett, he will be able to provide additional information about access to other technical expertise outside of the team within Pathway.
In paragraph 79, you continue, the progress of these fixes was well documented in the monthly report. By way of example, the December 97 monthly report set out the following issues. Quote, live experience over the last few weeks of release 1C has, as expected, thrown up a list of operational, procedural and minor software errors which require careful attention. The total list is higher than expected, and the pressure now falls on customer service to manage the operational introduction of the various fixes. The January 98 monthly report provided an update on these issues. Quote, substantial progress has been made with release 1C over the last 4 weeks, with a large number of major operational issues successfully fixed. This system is now much more operationally easy to use by the counter staff, and this should help considerably. Was anything done to consider why there were a higher than expected number of bugs, errors and defects?
I don't recall.
I.e. a moment of self-reflection. Why is this number higher than we expected?
I would be making a conjecture comment now, as opposed to recalling specifically something which I'm afraid was 25 years ago.
I understand.
To make part of the public record, there was at the time good conversations. These were not 5-minute board meetings.
Can you recall now who provided the training to the individuals who provided customer service?
No, I'm afraid I can't.
Can you recall whether there was any work done at this time, I'm talking about 1997, 1998, to consider from a postmaster's perspective the operating experience of the system?
Well, as a result of reading 4,000 pages of documents in the last few weeks, I do recall in that review that there had been engagement with the sub-postmasters in getting feedback. I cannot give you very precise definition of exactly all the process that went through and the exact timing, but there was dialogue. We had a very professional, solid team engaged full-time on this project, and including, as I've been reminded through review of these documents, feedback from sub-postmasters. The board would only get a high-level commentary.
Do you understand what I mean when I refer to the concept of reference data?
In broad terms, yes.
And I'm using it to, in this sense, data that's used to classify or categorize other data across a system. Typically, they are static data or slowly changing over time, like units of measurement, fixed conversion rates.
Yes, I understand what you're talking about.
Calendar structures, that kind of We've heard in the inquiry some expert evidence as to the importance of reference data, and in particular, if reference data are used in a data-driven logic system, such as this, and such reference data are not timely or accurate, and or if they're complex,
Yeah.
the system that they support will not operate as intended. I
Yes.
understand, so that's the context for these questions. Can we look, please, at Fujitsu, FUJ 000582166, please? This is one of the monthly progress reports.
Yes.
And just to be clear, were these given to the board for its monthly board meetings, or are these a separate species of document?
As I recall, they were provided to the board.
Can we, you'll see this is for December 1997. Can we turn to page 15 of the document, please? Just go back a page so you can see the context, please. Look at the whole page on the previous page. Thank you. So under current critical problems, or problem, and then under 4 is issues, and we're looking at one of the issues. Go back to page 15, please. And it's the second bullet point from the bottom. That's it. Reference data, this is 2 bullet points up. Reference data is poorly defined in the contractual requirements, but is crucial for the proper control of changes to outlet/product data. POCA are only now realising its significance, and we must be vigilant if we are to avoid requirements creep. Do you see that?
Yes.
Given that ICL Pathway was brought in to provide the expertise to build and thereafter to operate the system, can you assist us as to why ICL Pathway had seemingly not anticipated the need carefully to describe and define the reference data and their importance in the contractual requirements?
You know, I'm afraid I cannot recall specific discussions around this topic. I would say that almost certainly, and I would have expected ICL Pathway to have anticipated reference data. As I recall, again, reminded by these document reviews, that there was a dispute or disagreement about who was responsible for reference data. What I understand from the review of the documents, our view was, which seems reasonable, that the post office was to provide that reference data of the instruments and de facto standard, the word is reference data, the reference point for transactions going through the system. Is not uncommon in my today's world of trading software, because I'm still working full-time, of having contracts that are traded having a standard definition. So reference data is a common feature, as you're saying, for any major system.
Given as this bullet point records that reference data is crucial for the proper control of changes to outlet and product data, it would be important for it to be clearly defined in the initial contractual requirements.
The requirement for reference data, without doubt, the precise definition of the format, probably.
Can we look a little further on into the piece, please, to March 1998 in relation to this issue? This is FUJ 0005 8170. And this is the monthly report for March 1998. And can we look at page 5 of the PDF, please? And the third bullet point on the page. So in March 98. Third bullet point, excuse me, the last month has not been an easy one for the work on new release 2 planning and progress. Severe problems with the EPOS testing within Pathway and linking through to reference data within POCL have caused a delay of between 3 and 5 weeks to the schedule. The mitigation plan has now been drawn up, although this has high risk and low confidence, and discussions are now in hand with the sponsors to open up the debate on a better plan to get to live trial in January 99. This area will remain extremely difficult for some time. And so it appears that EPOS and linking through to the reference data, as it's described there, was still in March 98 a live issue.
It does, and your earlier point is totally valid. Reference data is fundamental to the operation of this type of system.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 0005 8187, please? The monthly progress report for October 1999. And can we look at page 5 in the PDF, please? And can we look at the second half of the page? 3 bullet points from the bottom. So this is October 99. Too many reference data errors are being distributed to the live estate, which has been causing major problems with reconciliation and cash flow production. We're pressing for a full end-to-end review across Horizon as well as Pathway, such that solutions can be found and implemented prior to a rollout restart in January 2000. So it seems that in October 1999, mere 3 months or so before the planned rollout, reference data were still an issue.
That's what it's saying.
Can you now recall, to your knowledge, why was the issue with reference data still a problem at this time?
I'm afraid I've got no recollection of to be able to answer that question.
Do you even now remember that it was a problem
I do,
up until
I do,
very shortly before the contract rollout?
I do recall that reference data was a problem. I have to say that in my today life, reference data, whilst working for core systems, is often a problem even after go lives, because reference data changes, and if processes to manage those change are don't happen in a timely way, then problems can occur within the system, any system to be able to function properly. What I don't know in terms of the timing of this is whether we're talking about changes to reference data, new sources of reference data, or anything more fundamental. And
we'll be picking those issues up with later witnesses.
Yeah.
Just rolling back a little bit and looking at a separate issue. I think you believed, is this right, that if the DSS withdrew from the contract, the tripartite contract that had been signed, there was a real and immediate risk to ICL's planned flotation.
If we had ended in a legal dispute with the DSS, that would have had an impact on our credibility and flotation. So in one sense, that is the case. In terms of the pathway business, in the context of the whole of ICL, as I mentioned before, a £3 billion revenue, the float wasn't solely dependent on pathway, anything but that. What I would add on the related topic is that pathway taking a substantial provision loss, 180 million as well reported, did at least draw a line under the difficulties of the past at that time. And at the time we signed the new agreement, which was, as we were saying earlier, July 99, the potential of the ICL float still existed.
The suggestion I was making to you was that you believed that if the DSS withdrew from the contract, never mind litigation, there was a risk to, a real and immediate risk in your mind to ICL's planned flotation. Isn't that right?
The way they withdrew the settlement agreement, it was my answer. They do not have, just as I believe I put in my statement, it wasn't viable for ICL or ICL Pathway to withdraw unilaterally. Parties can't unilaterally withdraw from contracts. So it would have almost certainly have led to some form of litigation which would have damaged flotation. I repeat what I've been saying several times today, that our focal point, encouraged by our colleagues in Fujitsu, fully supported by me, was to focus on trying to make this project a success, to deliver the program and the potential for the post office as well as the DSS.
Presumably, there would be a risk to flotation because of potentially the loss of hundreds of millions of pounds of future revenue for ICL from the benefits payment card side of the agreement.
The settlement that occurred cleared that issue up, in that the future potential of this contract for ICL Pathway and therefore ICL was understood after renewal, was not dependent on PFI. So it was dealt with as part of the settlement agreement. And as I said a moment ago, as of 99, the potential of the ICL float still continued.
Can we look at some documents in relation to this issue, please, and start with DWP 400174. This is a letter, if we just look at the next page, please, from you.
Yep.
Your signature's been redacted there, and in fact it was PP'd.
Yeah,
so
that's
somebody
fine.
else's signature's
That's
been redacted.
That's fine.
And then go back to the first page, please, and see that it's a letter dated the 27th of July to...
98.
Yes, 98.
Yeah.
To Frank Field MP, who was a Minister of State in DSS at the time.
Yes.
if we just read through, you say, I'm glad you've had the opportunity to see the ISEL pathway system, and we've been able to discuss the importance I place personally on delivering this system on behalf of the Benefits Agency and POCL. Were you there in that sentence or part of the paragraph emphasising how this project was tied to you as an individual rather than you writing simply as the figurehead of the company?
I have no idea where the word "I" was used.
Well, I personally.
Yeah, I personally, yeah.
What were you trying to convey?
I don't recall. Maybe my commitment to the project. That was it. I was clearly writing on behalf of the company. It was on company letter.
Yes, plainly you were writing on behalf of the company, but it seemed to suggest perhaps something more than that you were tying yourself personally, putting your personal position at stake.
Well, as I've said in my statement, and maybe this is where you're going, I at no time felt I was at personal risk on this project. We had full transparency throughout the group with what was going on, apart from the board meetings, regular other conversations, of which there obviously are no minutes, and the strategy and the approach to the project, the resolution of the problem, the robust position I took were not my strategy, it was our strategy.
You carry on, as you have seen for yourself, the system is already eliminating encashment fraud in the 204 post offices in which it is operating and is capable of being rolled out now to many others. Is that right, in the light of the documents we've just been looking at in the monthly reports, that as of 27th of July, it was now capable of being rolled out to many other post offices?
We were working through the issues that had arisen, and in conjunction with the parties would continue to roll out to other post offices.
You, skipping over a paragraph, say the system is technically sound. The entire project is deliverable within a relatively short timescale, i.e. within the lifetime of this Parliament.
Certainly my understanding, as reflected in that letter at that time, was that the issues that do exist in complex projects could be addressed, resolved, and therefore the programme could be delivered. It was not trying to say there were no issues at this particular time.
You've seen that we looked a moment ago at the monthly reports before this time saying that there were still problems with reference data, still problems with the EPOS system. Were you being open here in saying that the system's technically sound, it could be rolled out to many others, and the entire project is deliverable within a relatively short timescale?
It was my understanding at the time, and my recollection of the situation, that all of the problems that had been identified were resolvable problems. In any complex system, and I suggest anywhere, and we all see this every day, I think even today on WhatsApp, WhatsApp was down for a while. Issues occur, they get resolved, and we move forward. So I was making a statement in the context of the architecture and the approach to the overall program, as opposed to that particular moment on the program. I'm clearly been around technology for my entire career. I'm not a deep technologist, but I understand a lot about technologies and managing projects. And the team that we had around this, I felt and frankly still feel were more than competent to be able to give me the relevant advice, both within the pathway team as well as the ICL team, not to mention the broader Fujitsu team that at times were brought in to provide assistance.
You continue, the best way forward is to roll out the infrastructure as quickly as possible and to issue the payment card to all legitimate claimants. Failure to do so will significantly damage ICL and its flotation and the project sponsors. The only ones to benefit will be the fraudsters. And so here you were tying the need to roll out the project quickly with otherwise the significant damage to ICL's flotation, weren't you?
I think you're taking the words in a specific context. I don't recall writing those words, or I did sign the letter. I'm certainly not suggesting I didn't sign the letter. I don't recall those particular words, how that phraseology. I think the big point was, we talked about earlier on, that if we did not move forward constructively together with DSS and Post Office and find a solution to the way forward, then that would impact ICL's flotation. It was at no time, float was at no time an impact in terms of the resource allocation we made to this project and our extreme lengths we went to try and bring what our opinion was sanity to this project from an environment, government environment, which was very challenging to corral and get decisions in. And but to go back to your question, no time did flotation have any direct impact on this project.
Can we look, please, at Bayes 40278? Thank you. This is quite hard to read. You've been referred by the inquiry a couple of months ago to this record of a telephone conversation made
to David Wright, the ambassador.
Yes, the ambassador, the British ambassador to Japan. And this is, I think, either an email or a cable from the British Embassy dated the 26th of January 1999. We can see that at the top.
Yeah.
And if we just read it through together, we can see the subject, Project Horizon, ICL Fujitsu views. Then the summary, ICL Chief Executive calls, that's you, after discussions with Fujitsu, describes latter's, that's Fujitsu's, dismay, risk to ICL's flotation, and of Fujitsu's disengagement from ICL if Project Horizon fails. I believe the last risk is real. And then if we move on, please, to paragraph 2 under detail. At his request, Keith Todd, Chief Executive of ICL, called me on Saturday, the 23rd of January, after talks with the Fujitsu president. He expressed Fujitsu's, quote, complete disbelief and lack of understanding at Her Majesty's government's decision-making process, unquote. Fujitsu could not comprehend how Her Majesty's government could contemplate, quote, destroying ICL, unquote. If the project failed, the flotation of ICL would be undermined and Fujitsu would reconsider all its options on ICL. This might, according to Todd, include sale. Todd, that's you, who pointed out that the ICL purchase and the injections of capital into it by Fujitsu had very much been the baby of Yamamoto, the previous Fujitsu chairman, and Naruto, presently vice chairman and chairman of ICL. The new Fujitsu president, Akakusa, and chairman, Sekizawa, were adopted parents, and their commitment to the continuation of ICL could not be taken for granted. The comment by the ambassador, my own knowledge and experience of Sekizawa confirms this. Todd also thought that at a time of general Japanese corporate financial weakness, including Fujitsu, ICL had to make itself independently wealthy. The recent results have been good and the future was promising, but the danger to ICL's future in remaining a subsidiary of Fujitsu was that they might be broken up or sold. He repeated that a failure of Project Horizon would undermine flotation and would result in 700 to 900 job losses. He, that's the ambassador, undertook to pass your message on to those concerned in London. The message that you were conveying there was that unless the project proceeded, there was a real risk to ICL's flotation.
As I said a moment ago, that if the project did not proceed and we'd ended up in litigation, then our flotation would have been severely affected. The other thing that I have said so far, and as you take the elements that you're questioning and put them together, I had to take, and did take, with full knowledge of my colleagues, a robust position to try and cause something to happen. With hindsight, I was probably too patient too long, in my opinion, in relation to this particular topic, but hindsight is wonderful. What we had to do was to ensure that there was no ambiguity, that the consequences, and I think this was even indicated by one of the Fujitsu representatives, if I recall documents I've seen recently again, that if we could not find an agree way forward between the parties, there would be a significant impact. Flotation, quite frankly, was a byproduct, would have been a byproduct.
The flotation is the point that you consistently emphasise to external parties, isn't it? To Frank Field and to the British ambassador.
I would maintain that I recall emphasising all aspects of it. I go back again to what I said earlier on. The work that ICEL was doing in relation to the new information society, its impact on a whole raft of things was extremely positive to this country and a number of things going on. It was important that we got clarity. If we could not have got the attention of the key principles in this, then this project would have stopped and litigation would have occurred. And as I said a moment ago, in that context, flotation would have been put off. Flotation in the end was not stopped because of this project. It was stopped, as has been stated publicly, by the fact of the market conditions at the time. It was just before the market crash, I think in 2001, but also the view of the Fujitsu team was the ICL performance, and I agree with this, was not sufficient for the float to happen at that time.
And that was the point at which you resigned, is that right?
I did, and I put in my statement one other thing, which in a sense is, well, is not in a sense, is absolutely my opinion, but was not previously stated. As happened, and you referred to it earlier, a couple of years later, all of the Fujitsu group became Fujitsu and not separate businesses. So it was clear to me in July 2000 that that an independent floated ICL was not going to happen, and it seemed appropriate for me to resign.
Was that resignation therefore connected to the failed desire to float ICL on the stock market, which was itself caused by the loss of hundreds of millions of pounds of revenue from the loss of the benefits card
No,
element of pathway?
no.
Was it because of your oversight of the pathway project that Fujitsu held you accountable as the
No.
CEO?
No.
I think at the point at which you departed, there was no replacement for you, was there?
No, Richard Christou acted
On a temporary basis.
on a temporary basis, and then I believe subsequently took over.
Moving the chronology on, I think you were one of the people that attended a meeting with the then Prime Minister Tony Blair on the 12th of April 1999. Can we look at a record of what happened at that meeting? CBO 6059.
Mr. Beer, could
Yes.
I make one additional point just in relation to the last question?
Absolutely.
Is that okay? I don't know which exhibit the number is, but going on the point of Mr. Sekizawa's note to me after the settlement, I just want to put on record here that questioning at the time when we settled the dispute, Sekizawa-san sent a personal note, which I got approval from Fujitsu to release. You may have been able to insist upon it, because it set out his view very, very clearly as to my involvement in this project, his view about the government situation. And so anything I can say that people that's in this room or listening outside of this room can say, you could just sit back and say, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But, I put that forward to you as, the chairman of Fujitsu's view to me, thanking me for my efforts to bring this to a conclusion and accepting the fact that Fujitsu wanted to take the position they did, which was to resolve the matter so we could all move forward.
As you've raised that, and I think in fairness to you, we should look at it, it's witness 03380-121. Witness 0330121. I'll try it again. I think it's my error. WITN 03880-121. Thank you. Is this the document you were referring to?
Yes, it is.
No, it's disappeared.
It was.
Thank you. And you can see that it's dated the 1st of June 1999, addressed to be for your eyes only. Thank you for your email dated the 28th of May 99. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to you personally for finalising the new agreement with the Post Office. So just to orientate ourselves, this is after the Benefits Agency had pulled out, the DSS has pulled out, and an agreement has been reached with the Post Office for a design and build contract, essentially. I'm in line with you that I too am fiercely enraged with the UK government that you had to spend so much of your time, effort and costs in vain, all because of the irresponsibility of their departments, blaming it on each other. Although ICL is not much to blame regarding the failures of the project in the past, the fact is the actual impact on our performance is significant. What did you understand that to mean? The actual impact on our performance is significant.
We took a provision for £180 million as a result of this project.
The £180 million hit, I think you described it.
Hit, yeah.
I'm thankful to you for understanding and respecting Fujitsu's decision. Instead of arguing with the government now and risking additional time, effort and cost, it will be more beneficial for the Fujitsu group to tolerantly negotiate with the government and keep our chance to try and recover the past debt with our own efforts. On that, did you understand, keep our chance to try to recover the past debt with our own efforts, to be under the contract that you did agree with Post Office Counters Limited?
Post Office and the wider ICL. Let us use our energy on constructive things rather than fighting old battles.
Well, the reason I asked that is in the next paragraph, he says this new agreement will give us this chance. He's linking with the chance to recover the £180 million with the signing of the new agreement. He continues, however, we still have as much tasks as we did in order to achieve our project goal. We must learn from our experiences and thus gather all of the strengths within Fujitsu Group to overwhelm our challenges and achieve profit for ICL in the total project. As a result, this should be an outstanding infrastructure for the UK government and the Post Office. I look forward to your further success. Best regards, Sekizawa.
Thank you. And just for completeness, you don't need to show them unless you want to, but the other two letters from Sir Michael Butler, the chairman of Pathway, are part of my evidence, as is Sir David Hancock, who was an advisor, expressing similar views. Sorry, I took you off.
Yeah, Bays 40275. I'm sorry, Bays 6059. We were on. And can we go forwards to page 5 of this clip, please? This should be a letter dated the 12th of April 1999 from the late Jeremy Hayward, then the Prime Minister's, the then Prime Minister's then Principal Private Secretary, and it's addressed to dear Ros. She was a senior civil servant in Her Majesty's Treasury. The Prime Minister was grateful for the Chief Secretary's useful minute. The Prime Minister duly met some people, including you. The Prime Minister opened by thanking Mr. Naruto for the sensitive way in which Fujitsu had handled the closure of their semiconductor plant in his constituency. It's right, isn't it, that Fujitsu had a large footprint in the Prime Minister's very own constituency?
Norton Aycliffe, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Naruto, in turn, thanked the Prime Minister for the help that Fujitsu had been given by local agencies in the northeast. 479 out of 550 employees had now found new jobs. And then this turning to the Horizon project, Naruto said that he was very grateful for the work Steve Robson had done in recent weeks. He understood that ICL were now close to agreement with the DSS and Post Office Counters Limited on a new way forward. ICL were fully committed to supporting the UK government. He wanted to ask the Prime Minister to give Steve Robson complete authority to bring the current decisions to a successful conclusion. On the 23rd of April, the Fujitsu board would meet to decide whether to support the new project. He personally looked forward to securing a positive outcome. But he sincerely wished to get a legally binding agreement before the 23rd of April meeting. Fujitsu was spending £5 to £10 million a month on the existing project. Nearly £300 million have been invested so far. Sums of this magnitude could simply not be ignored. And then your contribution is noted. You added that more progress had been made in the last 6 weeks than in the previous 9 to 12 months. Was that true? That the parties have made more progress in a 6-week period than they had in a year?
My comment was in relation to coming together with a project and commercial agreement that was acceptable. Some of the preliminary work that happened with, I think his name was Adrian Montague, obviously the Corbett piece of work, which didn't get to a conclusion, but Steve Robson, I do recall, as being pragmatic, I think I referred to that word, and enabled to, as I recall it, was in the Treasury, was able to facilitate the agreement which ended up getting signed.
So the more progress in 6 weeks than in the previous 9 to 12 months is a reference to what specifically?
The contract and commercial agreement on a project and a commercial way forward.
Okay, not the project generally. The project now in prospect was fully deliverable. Now, this, of course, was before the benefits agency had pulled out.
That was just before, yeah.
Yes, we're here April 1999, and it wasn't until May 99 that they pulled out. Was that right, that the project was fully deliverable in April 99?
I made that statement, so yes, it must have been. The answer is yes. The challenges were better understood in that we had had several weeks and months of being able to brief relevant parties, and as we know, the following month, I think it was in May, the proposal came forth on a restructure of the project.
Can you now recall that the basis on which you came to the assessment that you were confident that the project, despite all the difficulties that had occurred, was fully deliverable? What material were you using to reach that view expressed to the Prime Minister?
I would have had the information at that time from the project team. What we needed to do was to resolve the commercial issues around the project, and we at no time expected what happened in May, which was the benefit agencies to be withdrawn. That was a surprise to us. We were not also expecting that the contract would change from PFI.
Can we look, please, at Bayes 40275? This is again slightly difficult to read. It's an internal email from a Catherine Hathaway to 6 or so recipients at the top. Catherine Hathaway, a civil servant in the Department of Trade and Industry, to a series of other civil servants, dated the 11th of May 99. And we'll see in due course that it refers to a meeting that she had the previous day, so the 10th of May 1999. If we scroll down, please. It says, I met with George Hall yesterday.
George Hall was the government affairs advisor to me and the company. He worked full-time for us.
Was he an ICL director?
Not a director, no.
But he was an ICL employee?
Employee, yeah.
I met with George Hall yesterday to discuss a number of things, including our forthcoming away day, the Information Age Partnership meeting, and a more general updating on all things ICL. Horizon. We spent the first 30 minutes discussing Horizon, during which George confirmed that he knew that ministers were split between cancelling the project and option B1 version 2. He also knew exactly where that split lay, i.e. Her Majesty's Treasury, DSS on the one hand, versus others. When asked how the deadline of the 23rd of April had been extended, he admitted it was only because ICL were fudging their financial reporting with potentially disastrous results as far as the directors were concerned. he confirmed that Keith Todd will lose his job should Horizon go down, and that Fujitsu will divest themselves of ICL, which will be broken up, and the services side will probably go to Siemens along with some other Fujitsu interests on the hardware side. Siemens are known to be interested in acquiring a services business and are already in discussion with Fujitsu. Presumably, Mr. Hall would be authorised by you to have meetings like this to try and influence and persuade the government.
He was a senior representative that I relied on a lot until I saw this document and was horrified by the language which he was used. I had not seen that. He was not authorised to say we were fudging the accounts, because we never have, never will, never would. As I said in my statement, the only thing I think he could have been misinterpreting is some reference to the discussion about changing the accounting date, but that's not fudging the accounts, and it was never a question of fudging the accounts. Take exception to that. So I do not, obviously this is a minute that she's written. I've not been allowed to speak to George about it, and haven't spoken to him appropriately, but I find it ridiculous, the statement. In bold language, Keith's going to lose his job. Well, you saw a note back from Sekizawa. At no time did I have any concerns about my role, my job, but we've discussed that earlier.
So assuming Ms. Hathaway, the civil servant, is able to take an accurate note of what happened, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know why Mr. Hall was saying to government that there had been any fudging of ICL's financial reporting.
No, and I have no idea whether this. Did it say whether it was a phone call or a casual conversation?
I met with George Hall yesterday.
Yeah, so
and he spent the first 30 minutes discussing Horizon.
He certainly had no authority to use language he used as minuted here, because it's inaccurate, in my opinion.
If you can help us, ICL were fudging their financial reporting with potentially disastrous results as far as the directors were concerned, that sentence. If ICL were fudging their accounts, and I know you said that they were.
Categorically not.
What would the disastrous results for the directors be?
But it just wouldn't happen.
I know, but the sentence here, what could be the link?
With respect, no, actually, yeah. You need to ask Mr. Hall what he was talking about. I do not know. I've not been allowed to speak to him to say, what were you talking about?
He's reported to have said that.
My apologies. It's just, yeah.
You would lose your job if Horizon went down, and Fujitsu would divest itself of ICL. Now, the latter part of that, looking at the documents we've seen already, is an accurate statement. There was a risk of that happening.
Well, it had to be acknowledged as a risk. I remind you, in the context of all these individual elements of it, we were taking on a number of significant institutions in this country to try and get some considered rational mediation to an answer, and we'd have several months to years of little progress. So we were taking a robust position, as I've mentioned several times today, and undoubtedly Mr. Hall would have been taking a similar briefing, but at no time, and there was no substance to those statements that are written down here.
You've said, Mr. Todd, a number of times that we took a robust position, and Mr. Hall may have received such a briefing. Is that code for saying the position may have been overstated as part of a negotiating process, i.e. the consequences to Fujitsu and for you may have been overstated or over-dramatised in order to make a point?
I think all aspects needed to be laid out in terms of the potential consequence. It was part of a transparent, a measured communication to all the parties. Whilst the outcome resulted in a multi-million loss for ICL on my watch, under my stewardship, settling the matter to be able to move on was the right decision, and I have no disagreement with the action we took with my colleagues in ICL and Fujitsu to settle and move on.
You mentioned approaching this in a measured and balanced way. Can we look at HMT 6013, please? This is a minute dated the 13th of May 1999, again circulating within government. And so it's not something that you would have seen at the time. So just putting it in context, Mr. Hall met the day, 2 days before this, with Catherine Hathaway on the 10th of May. Her minute was dated the 11th of May, and we're now on to the 13th of May. And this is a brief record of our 3 meetings with ICL in the last 24 hours, yesterday morning and evening. And this evening, ICL were represented by Keith Todd and Richard Christou, and for the first meeting, George Hall. And then just scroll down, please. It's recorded too. By the time of the second meeting, ICL, Todd in particular, were clearly quite worked up. We therefore allowed them to do most of the talking. The key points to record are as follows. The President and Deputy Chairman of Fujitsu are coming to London tomorrow to discuss the project with ICL. The provision they will need to make for the sunk costs of the benefit payment card will shift Fujitsu into the red for 1998. ICL's view is that Fujitsu would not respond to this provision in a rational way. The response is likely to be cut their losses and sue, rather than pursue what has the potential for being an attractive deal under, that's option B3. Then over the page, please. Fujitsu have asked to see the Prime Minister tomorrow, whatever the situation, whether we're close to a deal or not. Todd and Christou said that the only way to avoid the provision in the accounts would be for the government to sign a legally binding agreement. And then moving on to the next bullet point, a clear condition from ICL is that the public sector pick up the full sunk costs incurred by ICL, i.e. as if we were terminating for convenience. And so you delivered the message in that paragraph 3, I think. Is that right?
Sorry, which paragraph?
Just go back. So the key points to record are as follows. That's what you were saying.
That suite of things.
Yes, the sweep of things under the sub-bullet points. You say that, or you said that provision will need to be made for the sunk costs of the benefit payment card, and that will shift Fujitsu into the red for 1998. Is that right? It would move Fujitsu itself into the red.
Yeah, I wouldn't recall that without seeing the documents, but I assume that is correct.
So serious not just for ICL Pathway, but for Fujitsu itself?
No, there were other challenges in the world and the technology world at the time. Fujitsu historically had made several $1 billion a year. So, it would have just been for that particular year.
And then over the page, please, the passage under the second bullet point, which says, Todd and Christou said that the only way to avoid the provision in the accounts would be for the government to sign a legally binding agreement. Do you think that's the reference back to what Mr. Hall may have been referring to about fudging the accounts, i.e. provision had yet been made in the accounts
No.
for the loss?
No, and I don't. I'm not going to assume the minutes are accurate. I have to assume the minutes are accurate. I do not recall that particular request, because just seeing it in the document the other day, it seems completely unreasonable to have something signed. I mean, it wasn't ever going to happen, so I don't quite understand how it was that way. There was one other document that I saw that didn't. Well, anyway, let me not open that up.
Can we turn to Bayes 40317, please? And this is part of a briefing note to the Secretary of State. It's dated the 3rd of June 99, and it's in readiness for a meeting with the President of Fujitsu and the Vice Chairman of Fujitsu and Chairman of ICL that was going to take place on the 13th of June 1999. Can we look at the second page, please? Paragraph 1 records the meeting that we've just looked at. At the meeting, Mr. Sekizawa stressed that unless an unconditional agreement could be signed by the 17th of May, Fujitsu would have to accept a £306 million in their provision in their consolidated group accounts. And then reading on 3 lines from the end of paragraph 2, the damage to ICL and the prospects of its flotation next year would be substantial. You, that's the Secretary of State, undertook that the government would convey its decision to Fujitsu within that timetable. And then paragraph 4, in the tense negotiations over the following days, we know that it was your letter to Keith Todd of the 21st of May, that's the Secretary of State's letter to you, confirming the government's wish to proceed with the project, and the later personal appeal to Mr. Naruto by the Deputy Ambassador on your behalf that persuaded Fujitsu not to abandon the negotiations. Again, we see the link between the damage to ICL by the loss of the project and damage to its flotation made in that second paragraph. Is that right? As a point being made to government.
That is what it said.
We've seen a number of times now a link drawn here between the successful progression of the deal and the flotation of the company. You agree?
There have been several references to it and several other aspects, but there have been several references to the float. I agree.
In your witness statement, if we turn that up, please, at page 52. So that's WITN 03880100. Page 52. And paragraph 154, you say, 6 or 7 lines from the bottom, although I noted in my call to the ambassador to Japan that the failure of Horizon may undermine the flotation of ICL, ICL had many successful projects already, and the status of the Pathway project was not a deciding factor in whether or not to float the company. Is that correct?
In my view, that is correct. We have not mentioned in this conversation today, we had struck it during this period we're talking about, a strategic deal with Microsoft that was expanding this business. We had made a number of investments into the new emerging internet world that were proving to be very positive and successful. The world was transforming from the old technology world to the new. I had taken ICL to become a services company, now Fujitsu Services, all of which were significant attributes of a business with recurring revenue that would be capable of being floated. Clearly, if we'd had a legal dispute, as I said earlier, with the government on a major project, that would have very directly impacted the float and could potentially have killed it. But the fact that we resolved the problem in the May-July 99 period meant that as we went into 2000, subject to the earlier point of market conditions and our other performance, the float was still on. And you will find that in other documents in terms of public discussions and even internal discussions. So,
if it's right that ICL had many other successful projects and the status of the project pathway was not a critical factor in deciding whether or not to float the company, why do we see it mentioned in the 5 times in all of the documents that I've mentioned, seemingly as a lever to persuade government to take some action?
I think the central levers were the importance of getting the post office infrastructure modernised before the benefits agency withdrew. The work to improve fraud prevention in DSS. Float was, one factor. You have drawn significant attention to it. In my opinion, it was a factor in our life, and there are always 2 variables. One, when, and the other one is if the float would take place. It was my opinion that once we had settled in July 99, that we, with strong performance through 2020, float was still achievable at a significant valuation above that which Fujitsu had invested.
You rely in your statement, turning to the relationship between ICL and Post Office after July 1999, you rely in your statement very significantly on the nature of the PFI contract that was initially struck to explain the difficulties between POCL and BA on the one hand and ICL on the other, and the impact that those relationships had on the successful delivery of the project before July 1999. After the benefits agency withdrew, this contract was a more familiar contract for build and the provision of services. Is that right?
That's correct.
With a purchase of services by POCL from ICL as the contractor for the payment of money.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
There was no PFI arrangement after May 1999, and so the PFI arrangement that previously existed, would you agree, could provide no rationale for or explanation for anything which arose in either the direct contractual relationship between ICL and POCL or what happened thereafter?
There was a period of decommissioning with the DSS that I recall happening, but no major impact.
Can I turn to the importance and significance of acceptance? It's fair to say, in summary, that in your statement you place a lot of store by acceptance with a capital A. Correct?
Yes, there was a clear acceptance procedure that had been agreed between the parties.
In summary, you say that because POCL must have been satisfied with the functionality, or POCL must have been satisfied with the functionality and reliability of Horizon, because there were detailed provisions agreed between the parties as to what constituted acceptance and what did not, and POCL decided to proceed with the rollout of the contract.
That's correct. There was a period of delay from reviewing the documents between, I think, August and September 99, and which a number of issues were being addressed. But the point I think I make it in my statement is the final decision to roll out rested with POCL.
And so essentially you're saying we've got the detailed provisions as to acceptance by the customer. They did decide to roll out. In the light of the detailed provisions as to acceptance and the decision to roll out, a decision that rested with them, they must have been satisfied with the functionality and reliability of the system.
They accepted the system with the view to national rollout.
Under the post PFI arrangement, payments received by ICL were contingent upon acceptance, weren't they?
There was one payment that was tied to acceptance, as I recall.
£68 million.
Yeah.
And so there was a financial incentive on ICL to ensure that the client accepted through the acceptance process the rollout of POCL, of Horizon rather.
There was a payment due that was not in our control, that was dependent on POCL, Post Office Counters Limited, accepting the project. But they had the sole right, as I recall, to decide. It's not uncommon to have, if there's long delay, a de facto acceptance, but I don't recall that being in this case.
Can we look, please, at poll 3039912? And you'll see that this are notes, draft notes from a meeting to discuss acceptance in December 1998. And those present from ICL and Mr. Coombs and Mr. Dix, names that you'll be familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in paragraph 1, it's recorded under the heading acceptance procedures that Mr. Coombs confirmed that ICL were asking for acceptance in terms of both cessation of termination rights related to acceptance and the start of income guarantees after the final runs of end-to-end and model office and before the live trial of NR2 child benefit. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. But this, could we just go back to the date?
Yes, 99, December 98 rather.
98. So this is before the reset of the contract. Yeah.
And so here,
So we're all.
yes, yeah, we understand where we are.
Yeah.
Would you agree that what is being recorded there at this time is a request by ICL to accept the system without any live trials?
I don't recall that. I've seen references to that. But as I recall it, acceptance principles for national rollout were reset as part of the contract reset in July 99.
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
So I'm saying that the acceptance criteria that were in existence when national rollout was decided, I believe, were set in the July 99 contract reset.
Yes.
Not in 1998.
You're correct. In terms of the acceptance process, can you recall discussions in the board about decisions to lower the bar on what constituted acceptance in a second and then third supplemental agreements?
I have no recollection of those discussions at the time. The project team, supported by Mr. Christou, as I recall it, and I think Mr. Oppenheim was also key to the reset of the contract day to day. I'm not distancing myself from that. I'm just saying that in terms of my detailed knowledge of every conversation is limited because I was only involved in a few of those conversations, and obviously involved with the final sign-off of them. So your question was I aware of any...
Lowering of the bar, as I put it.
I don't recall any conversations about that.
If you don't, I won't ask you detailed questions then about the second and third supplemental agreements. Can we just then look, please, at the knowledge of within post office counters about some of the things that they did or didn't know at the time of the acceptance decision? Can we look at Fujitsu 308060? And this is a review of the EPOS Pinnacle Task Force. Ignore the date in the top right-hand side, 14th of May 2001. That's, I think, an artifact of either printing or some other process that's been applied to this document. Because one can see from the abstract that the document reports on the activities of the EPOS Pinnacle Task Force, which was in place between 19th of August and 18th of September 1998 to reduce to manageable levels the EPOS Pinnacles outstanding at that time. You can see the distribution list includes Terry Austin. Do you remember what his role was at that time, so August, September 98?
Don't specifically, either operations or maybe QA.
Mr. Bennett, Mark Bennett at that time?
No.
And D. McConnell, I think that's David McConnell, Dave McConnell.
No.
You don't remember his role in September 98?
No, they need to, as you are going to talk to Mr. Bennett, not John Bennett.
We can see the authors of it. Do you recognise the name? That's Jan Holmes. And the D. McConnell is David
I don't recall.
McDonald. No.
And I don't recall seeing this specific report. Which
At the time?
At the time.
No, I mean, I haven't got any material that suggests that it was passed to you. Can we look, please, at page 7 of this document, please, at the heading EPOS Code. And the authors point out it's clear that senior members of the task force are extremely concerned about the quality of code in the EPOS product. Earlier this year, EPOS Code was re-engineered by Isha, and the expectation is that work carried out in Boston was to a high standard and of good quality. Since then, many hundreds of Pinnacle fixes have been applied to the code, and the fear is that code decay will, assume it hasn't already, cause the product to become unstable. This presents a situation where there is no guarantee that a Pinnacle fix or additional functionality can be made without adversely affecting another part of the system. However, a more worrying concern from the programme's perspective should be the reliance on the EPOS product in its current state as a basis for planning and delivery. And then, secondly, at page 17 of the PDF, please. It's paragraph 7.3 at the bottom. Although parts of the EPOS code are well written, significant sections are a combination of poor technical design, bad programming, and ill thought out bug fixes. The negative impact of these factors will continue and spread as long as the pinnacle fixing culture continues. This is partly due to the nature and size of the bug fixing task, and partly due to the quality and professionalism of certain individuals within the team. And then he gives some code examples. They give some code examples. Was the information of this type of raising serious concerns with the EPOS code drawn to the board's attention, so far as you're aware?
I don't have any recollection of what you just covered.
Would you expect, under the revised arrangements for a design and build contract, for this kind of information to be revealed to the client?
In the contents we've just discussed, I apologise, but I don't have all the individuals calibrated. I would have expected that the team would have taken a view as to what was being resolved, what was fixed. By the time that we signed the new contract. But you may get more insight from my colleagues.
Would you, looking at this information here, expect it to be revealed to the client?
I would want to do a thorough review of what it's saying, what remedial actions were taken, and then assess the consequences of it. Clearly, would need to be fixed.
So it need to be fixed, not necessarily revealed to the client?
If there was any risk to the program delivery, it should be revealed to the client.
Do you mean the timing of the program delivery, or do you mean the quality of what was delivered? The reliability and integrity of what was delivered?
I think if there was any doubts on the reliability and integrity of what was being delivered, it should be declared to the customer. I was just reflecting on the fact when code is written, even with good developers, it's not uncommon to find through peer review or unit testing or systems testing issues which then get fixed. The customer doesn't, I think it's a poor use of the customer's time when those sort of processes are occurring. But if there was any question on the integrity of the system, then it should be declared.
And in your position, I don't think you will know one way or another whether this information was revealed to Post Office Counters Limited.
As I said, I have no knowledge of this.
Thank you. In the time allowed, they're the only questions that I would ask, save for this. Are there any reflections or broader statements that you would wish to make in the light of what we now know as to the consequences of the system that was designed and delivered under your watch?
Quite clearly, and in my statement, and we've talked about it today, signing a contract with 2 customers. As I reflect on the whole question, even over this last weekend, with the intense battle that went on to try and get some common sense, in my opinion, hindsight is wonderful, but maybe it'd be better had we not bid for the contract. Do I think that ICL Pathway, ICL Group, Fujitsu had the skills to implement this project? Absolutely. Was it a complex project? Yes, it was. The nature of these inquiries are always focused on and appropriately focused on the things that went wrong. What I have no understanding of is what actually, other than as a user of the post office, where many more services are provided, I've always liked to think that some of those came from this project. I mean, the overriding thing, and this thing that we referred to this earlier on, there can be no comfort, but absolute, complete sympathy with the victims of the events that actually occurred over the last 22 years.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. As I say, they're the questions that I ask at the moment. So could we take the afternoon break before you may hear questions from Mr. Steen, Mr. Henry, and possibly Ms. Patrick? So we can't hear you, you're on mute.
Certainly, we'll take our break. What's the time now?
Half
For
past.
practical purposes, 3:30.
Yes, it's half.
Yeah.
It's half past in England.
Have
So.
we got any idea how long any further questioning is to be? I say that because I want to say now that I would be reluctant to expect Mr. Todd either to go much beyond 4:30 or to return tomorrow, so that people need to understand that their questioning needs to be fitted in to the remaining period this afternoon, I think.
So I think that's understood, and I see both Mr. Henry and Mr. Steen nodding, and I'd calibrated the questions that I'd asked accordingly to allow a reasonable time before 4:30 for such
That's
questions
fine.
to be asked.
All right then. So I'll see you again at 3:45 if that's sufficient time for the others.
Thank you very much, sir.
And you hear and see me?
Yes, well, I can hear you, and no doubt now I can see you as well.
I'm
Yes.
very grateful. Mr. Todd, good afternoon. My name is Sam Steen. I represent a number of sub-postmasters, mistresses and managers before this inquiry. I'd like to ask you a question, or some questions, about the Fujitsu and police and post office contract. And I'm going to take you directly to a document which is FUJ 6087. You'll see there this is a particular page of the contract, and the relevant part that I'm going to take you to is under paragraph 4.1.6, and you'll see there it says prosecution support. Now, just to familiarise yourself with this, I'm going to read it out. So this is part of the contract between Fujitsu and the Post Office. Prosecution support. Fujitsu Services shall ensure that all relevant information produced by the Horizon Service infrastructure at the request of Post Office shall be evidentially admissible and where relevant capable of certification in accordance with the requirements of the law in relation to criminal proceedings. And then the second part at 4.1.6 says this: at the direction of Post Office, audit trail and other information necessary to support live investigations and prosecutions shall be retained for the duration of the investigation and prosecution, irrespective of the normal retention period of that information. So the first part at 4.16 is about the provision of information to the Post Office in relation to criminal proceedings. Can you help us, Mr. Todd, understand what was Fujitsu's understanding of the requirements of the law in relation to criminal proceedings?
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to assist. I don't have a specific recall of this clause. The fact that the words here are talking about Fujitsu Services suggests that it is in a document that was post-ICL pathway. My time at ICL pathway, but putting that on one side. My observation on it is that it is, if it's part of the contractual document, it would and should be complied with by the service provider.
Can you recall whether there was any guidance or advice given to Fujitsu Pathway from an experienced criminal lawyer as to what this meant by way of requirements?
I have no recollection of.
Right. Who out of the team of people involved with this contract preparation and then operation of Horizon would have been in charge of this aspect of the Horizon Systems services?
At the time I was involved, between the proposal stage and July 2000, the legal head and commercial head was Richard Christou. I recall, but not sure I could name, I think there was some legal advice taken in relation to the contract originally. But we had an internal legal team as well as using external counsel.
But are you talking about the contract itself and advice in relation to contract law? Are you talking about this particular aspect of the contract which targets criminal prosecutions and the potential for Horizon System to give information?
Recollection.
Let me finish, would you please? And the
Apologies.
potential for information to be given to the Post Office regarding criminal investigations. So which is it? Contract law or advice in relation to criminal law?
I don't have any recollection of a conversation with any of my colleagues about specifically the criminal law aspects.
Right. So Richard Christou was in charge of what aspect of things? That's legal.
Legal,
So generally legal.
all aspects of contract, and where any expertise was not available, I would expect to, I would have expected to get external advice on any specialist area.
Now, the operators of the Horizon System, do you recall whether they were ever informed of the relevant, this particular relevant section regarding prosecution support and what they needed to do to make sure that the Post Office was provided with information about the Horizon System?
I have no specific recollection of a conversation about this particular clause, whether it was in the original contract or this one. As I said, this refers to Fujitsu services, and it would not have done in the original contract.
The second part, if you can help us at all with this.
Yeah.
At the direction of Post Office, audit trail and other information necessary to support live investigations and prosecutions shall be retained for the duration of the investigation and prosecution, irrespective of the normal retention period of that information. Can you help with what was done to make sure that information was saved for the purposes of possible prosecutions and investigations?
The system, as I recall, had audit trail and resilience built in to ensure that the data was retained. I have no specific recollection of any direct conversation with the ICL Pathway team about the retention period that you're referring to.
Do you understand that overall these two paragraphs relate to the use of data from the Horizon System being put into the possible investigation of sub-postmasters and whether or not they've committed any offences? Do you understand that that's what this is about?
I do, with your assistance, yes, and seeing this clause.
Now, do you understand that if this isn't complied with, and if the information isn't being passed into the investigations properly about bugs, errors, difficulties with the systems, that innocent people could go to prison?
Well, that clearly shouldn't happen.
No, we all agree it shouldn't happen. It did happen, Mr. Todd.
Yep.
Do you understand now the importance of this paragraph?
I understood it when you first raised the importance of the paragraph. What I was addressing was your question about whether I knew how this was being addressed. And
Was it understood, going back, you've mentioned a number of times, things happened a long time ago, was it understood how important this section was in the contract at the time the contracts were signed?
I have to just repeat, I don't recall any specific conversation about this particular clause and any deviation from what we would do in our other environments where we are dealing with whether it's retail systems or banking systems.
Okay, two last questions. From your particular level within the organisation, what do you recall being put in place to monitor the operation of this system?
There was within a pathway monitoring of the services that were being delivered I do not recall, if you're referring back to this particular aspect, any particular application or service which was defined to ensure this was complied with.
Lastly, we know that the Benefits Agency withdrew from the original tripartite contract, yeah? We know that the Benefits Agency had a real interest in ensuring that their systems were not misused by way of fraud. You agree? Can you just help us in relation to this particular part of the contract? Was this particular part of the contract a hangover from the time of the Benefits Agency and their involvement? In other words, was this adapted from an original discussion in relation to the fraud requirements of the Benefits Agency or not?
I have no knowledge, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Todd, my name's Henry. Few questions. Could we please go up to FUJ 000 77834, please? And this is your Chief Exec's report, May 1997. Now, we know that the Labour landslide was on the 2nd of May 1997, and this is dated the 7th of May. And by that time, you'd already had a meeting with the Minister of State for Social Security.
Yes.
And I suppose you don't become a chief executive of a major company without being able without being able to cultivate power. Would you agree?
You have to engage with all stakeholders, political as well as business partners.
Was this a sort of mending fences, building bridges, and therefore getting new opportunities meeting?
I recall having a progressive programme through both political regimes. I recall nothing to do with this particular project, spending a Saturday with John Major and some of his colleagues around the future of the internet. So we had an extensive programme, as most of the technology providers in the UK did, to keep engaged with current government representatives, both on the civil service side as well as the political side.
Thanks. I mean, the tone of the Chief Exec's report is pretty positive. For example, the opportunity, political, paragraph 2, the opportunity to accelerate our re-engineering proposition for DSS is improved. And you also mention other opportunities, for example, with the Department of Education, correct?
Yes, if I may just take a brief moment for you. I referred to it earlier on, the transformation that was occurring in the 90s. We are talking 25 years ago,
yes,
with the advent of new technologies, was requiring organisations, both business as well as government and public sector, to look at their business processes, and that there was a significant opportunity for businesses like ICL and our competitors.
Thank you. Could we go to page 5, please? And I'm going to touch on this very briefly because Mr. Beer's already taken you to this paragraph, 7.5. This is talking about delay, and we notice, of course, paragraph 1, software bugs. We have advised the customer, second paragraph, that there could be a 6-week delay in the next release. The customer is appreciative of our open approach. Actions are in place to mitigate the consequence of delay, i.e. national rollout starting in January 1998 rather than November 1997. Do you think that the customer would have been quite so sanguine if they could foresee a delay to 1999-2000?
No, quite clearly with the events that unfolded, those timetables were wrong.
Yeah. Did you have a policy under your watch of complete, and I'm not making any loaded comment against you, but a complete candour in your subordinates so that you were going to be given, as it were, a completely accurate picture?
Well, I believe so. As many can attest, a very open person. I do not shoot messengers. I embrace messengers and deal with issues. Bad things happen in life, bad things happen in business. They need to be dealt with. I have not strayed from that principle from my days running 20,000 people to my days these days running 300 people. So I believe that they would tell me in appropriate candor.
Because obviously that wasn't an accurate prospectus. I'm not suggesting you were being dishonest, but that wasn't an accurate prospectus, was it?
Well, the complexities, it's almost, this process is like fast forwarding 20 odd years, but even 5 years into a few hours. You need to do it frame by frame, month by month. Things were evolving and being identified throughout this project and being dealt with. I said earlier, the team were under a lot of pressure on a complex project. They were resilient, and to this day, I would say they were doing all they could do to ensure the project was a success for everybody. Things happened then that resulted in delay.
Yes. Could we go now, please, to FUJ, Fujitsu 000-75721. And this is a follow-up meeting, or, well, it's the following year, in fact. The minutes are on the 6th of July 98, relating to a meeting on the 3rd of July 1998 with the Minister, Frank Field. Mr. Field's opening remarks to you were recorded that he was keen to see you to talk about social banking. You are reported to have said, and this is actually composed by John Bennett, one of your staff, Keith's opening remarks was that he was here to talk about the programme in the round. And the key points were that the programme is deliverable, that it is critical to ICL as well as DSS, POCL and government, and that the infrastructure being built is essential for all aspects of fraud, welfare, reform, the future of the post office, and all aspects of better government. Do you think on reflection that that was an oversell?
As I referred to earlier, at each stage where we bid for the contract, we believe that the proposal we put in were deliverable. At the reset, they were deliverable. It did require that we were able to bring together the constituents, and with the benefit of hindsight, the statement was clearly over-optimistic in terms of our ability to bring all parties together on the time frame that we thought. What happened subsequently is also tragic.
Yes. I'm going to come now to page 2, paragraph 4.8, running immediately into paragraph 4.9. You had a conversation, and Frank Field described the post office as a dependency culture. Do you recall that?
Not specific.
You don't recall it specifically. But then this is reported. There was no strong reaction to our key comment that the progress to ACT was inevitable but would take time and had to be managed alongside re-engineering of the post office network. And of course that is a reference, isn't it, to retaining the BPC, retaining the benefit card system, or the benefit payment card. Correct?
Yes, it was. There were.
Yeah. Could I just ask you, were you, as it were, side by side with the post office, complicit with them, prolonging for as long as possible the BPC making haste slowly because that was in the post office best interests as they perceived it, but also, of course, you had revenue per swipe, didn't you?
I certainly don't recall that thought process at all. We had a customer, one of the customers, DSS, who were very keen, as we've discussed earlier, on the benefit cards basis. It made sense to us. It was the emergence of smart cards, which we thought was the right way forward, but magnetic stripe. There had been a historic desire from DSS to go to straight bank transfer. But at the end of the day, it was the customer who had to dictate.
So with that in mind, could we come please to FUJ 000 75723? Of course, the problem is which customer? You've identified that already, haven't you?
Yes, yeah.
Now let's go to that document. Could we go down to paragraph 5, please? And we've got the following. Stuart Sweetman pointed out that what the minister was looking for could be provided by POCL with automation of the branches, a not very veiled reference to Horizon, but well put across. Stuart was backed up by Gyrobank, etc., etc. Customers want control, want cash, and get it now through the post office. Again, this is another meeting with Frank Field, 17th of July, 98 minutes, 20th of July, 98. Did you regard Stuart Sweetman as an ally?
Certainly not particularly, no.
My
recollection.
From memory, was he on side?
I think he was a competent businessman.
Right.
I had no personal relationship with him. I knew him through business. But it's going back a long time. Listening to many conversations which are not minuted about what is the best way for society to pay social security. At the end of the day, a lot of society that received benefits wanted cash still. The post office was the right way to go. The means to get there was a decision for the wider political environment and and specifically the Department of Social Security.
But obviously you would have, either you directly or your representatives would have acute antennae as to who was on side and who was not.
We'd have a view, and we did not, if you go back to the beginning of this early days, we did not have, as far as I recall, any influence on Peter Lilly's ideas about the benefits card. We were reacted to that idea.
Could we turn over the page, go down to paragraph 8, please? And if we could just, yes, thank you so much. If we go from the paragraph overall, which is the third one down, in brief, POCL gets a tick, Gyrobank gets a tick, DSS gets a cross, because they're now definitely anti-card. Sarah Graham, who was the secretary to Frank Field, his right arm, as it were, she gets a cross. And then at the end, we need to keep convincing David that the payment card is good. Do you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
The payment card, and David Sibic, of course, wasn't he at the Treasury? I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not certain, but it could be.
We can find.
Yeah, yeah.
But the payment card, of course, had a particular remuneration to it, did it not?
Yes, and this, sorry, I've forgotten the date of this particular document because the timescales are, I think, important in relation to this. set of concepts. You know, we were focused on the requirements, quote, our customers had, which was for the card. And so,
Right. Could I thank you very much, Mr. Todd. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be brief
Yep.
because I
Yep.
want to finish by 4:15
Yep.
because I've been told by my colleague that she's going to take 10 minutes.
okay.
Could we go, please, to poll 000 28525, please? And this is the 13th of November 1998. And by this time, you would agree, would you not? And obviously this is not your document, but it refers to you. By this time, there was a massive deterioration in relations between your company, you and others in government and departments. Correct?
13th of November, which year was?
1998.
Thank you. As I've said earlier, we took a robust position trying to get a positive answer for POCL, DSS and ICL pathway.
Yeah. I mean, the point is, however, that the analysis that is referred to, and this is from the Treasury, that DTI POCL has put to you completely ignores the transfer of risk that underlines ICL's proposals. And then I omit words with scant regard to the level of performance, significant price increases, payment in advance, acceptance of the project before it is fully trialled in any systematic form, and then redrawing the project in terms of the contractual basis, etc., etc., etc. I mean, obviously a clear split in government, but it seems that
We were, sorry to interrupt you, but if I may, the challenge was finding a single principal person that could bring this together. We were constructive throughout the years we were engaged in these discussions. As I said earlier, working on the project, trying to find solutions. But we, until it was finally resolved in '99, had found great frustration through the inability to get a single unified, if I may call it, a government position.
this was all in response, wasn't it, to a letter that you sent on the 9th of November? For that, we can go to BEIS 40421, please. We've just seen that the DTI and POCL are, as it were, seemingly in your camp, notwithstanding this letter of the 9th of November. And if we could get it up, BEIS, yes, thank you so much. Could we go to ICL proposals? No progress was made on other aspects, but at the last moment, ICL came forward with an immensely complex and comprehensive set of proposals for restructuring almost every element of the Horizon contractual basis. And then it refers to a diagrammatic illustration. Over the page, please. The minister's reactions, and no doubt some of this would have fed back to you. Wholly unacceptable, line 6. They saw the attempt to revise almost every aspect of the contract to ICL and Fujitsu's advantage, moving almost all liability and responsibility for funding the project, etc., etc., etc. Would you read the next few lines to yourself, please, up to there were strong voices.
Sorry, from where?
They saw the attempt, well, I'll read it out aloud. They saw the attempt to revise almost every aspect of the contract to ICL's and Fujitsu's advantage, moving almost all liability and responsibility for funding the project's financial deficit onto POCL as deeply insensitive and as demonstrating a refusal by ICL to accept responsibility for the serious delays to the project which have cost the public sector hundreds of millions of pounds in fraud and administrative savings.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't recall whose minutes these are, but I think they're a misreflection of the positive engagement we were trying to make to put forward some ideas. We were open to discussion, but we'd been, from my recollection, sort of blanked with being able to move forward. So we came forth with a set of propositions in order to try and instigate some engagement with us. That's my recollection.
I've got only one more document to deal with, but before we leave this, please, sir, could you go to page, I think it's page 4, and this is your contemporaneous view. Forgive me, page 3, it's paragraph 9. If we keep that page up on the screen, but I'll read paragraph 9 to you verbatim. At both meetings, Keith Todd expressed his disappointment, frustration, and sense of shock that ministers still appear to fundamentally misunderstand ICL's position. ICL was in fact the aggrieved party, not the guilty party, yet ministers appeared determined to punish them. ICL had put forward a positive and helpful set of interlocking proposals designed to enable the project to move forward. The company had given up its right to make a profit on a 10-year programme of work and was carrying and would continue to carry a considerable element of commercial risk. ICL had explained its position extensively to officials, but had found it difficult to gain access to the relevant ministers. ICL could only conclude that officials had represented badly or indeed had misrepresented the company's view to ministers, etc., etc. And then I'm going to omit words. The future of the project now lay between ICL and POCL, but at a meeting the previous evening, John Roberts had made it clear that he had been told by government that he had no authority to negotiate further with ICL. Ministers should now empower John Roberts to negotiate a deal. So John Roberts spoke your language.
John Roberts was his own man. I think you may have already seen John Roberts. He was his own man. He represented the post office. This project was important to the future of the post office. Separately, it was important to DSS for their benefits program. There was no cabal. I think I refer in my own statement to the fact that it did feel that there was more alignment with the post office. So when our surprise in May '99, the suggestion was it was just the post office came out, we concluded that we should accept a loss and move on and work with the post office.
But it seems from the last document that POCL, and I suppose the DTI as well, were prepared to put up with no live testing, transfer of risk, etc., etc.
That is incorrect.
Right, well, let's go to the final document, please, that I wish to put to you. HMT, and then I think it's, oh dear, I think it's 5 zeros and then 3 0. And if I'm wrong, it could even be 6 zeros and then 3 0. It's 6.
I'm happy if you'd ask me the question. The document can come up.
This is an HM Treasury document, and it's an update for the Prime Minister. And I think if we could get it up on screen, it's HMT, and then I think it is 6 zeros, 3 0. But I shall read it out verbatim while we're waiting for it to get up on screen, Mr. Todd.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Could you expand it to go to the bottom half of the page, please? Certainly there was a meeting in April 1999. This is actually undated, but whether it took place before or after your meeting with the Prime Minister in connection with Mr. Naruto, I don't know. But anyway, 3 key points. ICL want unconditional agreement today if they and Fujitsu are to avoid a provision in their accounts. unforeseen terms and conditions, if they come up, the public sector would have no right to withdraw. I mean, that is basically making Pockle a hostage to fortune, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it misrepresents completely what would have been said. It
see.
is completely inappropriate to expect an unconditional agreement to, today. So
So the Prime Minister is being misled.
No. I think that the way this has been documented is inaccurate from the conversation, and I don't know who was at this meeting, but if this is the meeting that I was at, that was not the way it was put across.
I see. ICL are not prepared to allow part of the contractual payment to be dependent on the system performing satisfactorily when fully rolled out. This means that the Post Office could pay for a system which did not perform as necessary.
No, but
True or
it's
false?
clearly
Clearly
not.
false.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
Fine. And then finally this, ICL are not prepared to give evidence of ownership of the assets involved or to give perpetual licenses for all the IPR, I presume that's the intellectual property. This means the Post Office could find that when the system is installed and operating, the IPR is owned by a third party. Such a third party would be in a strong position to drive a costly settlement with the Post Office. Who was the third party? Escher or Isha?
No. The context of this, I think, is challenging. It sounds to me that this was part of a discussion, negotiation about alternatives, where when the revision of the contract was put in place and what would happen at the end of the contract and the ownership of the infrastructure. So I think it's...
Well, but surely, I mean, Isha were the...
Subcontractor.
Yeah, and they owned Riposte.
Yes.
I mean, is that not a reference to Isha and Riposte?
Does it say that?
ICL are not prepared to give evidence of ownership of the assets involved or to give perpetual licenses for all the IPR.
I don't know what it's referring to. I'm sorry, I can't help.
All right. Ms. Todd, I represent 5 core participants. 3 went to prison when they should not have done. 1 was wrongly prosecuted and another one was sued and bankrupted on a travesty. Do you have anything to say to them?
That is appalling, and I have immense sympathy. And as I've said today and in my statement, complete support for this process to get to the bottom of what actually happened and why that miscarriage of justice should have occurred.
Mr. Todd, my name's Angela Patrick. I'm instructed, together with Mr. Tim Maloney, KC, on behalf of 64 sub-postmasters who were wrongly convicted, and were instructed by Hudjo solicitors. I've got a few questions. You've heard Mr. Henry say that I gave my hand away and said I would be 10 minutes. I think he's actually left me 7. So I'm going to try and be as quick as I possibly can.
And I'll be succinct back.
But if there is anything you don't understand, I'm Glaswegian. If I'm going too fast, just tell me to stop and we'll go a bit slower. So, Counsel to the Inquiry, Mr. Beer, has raised the issue of the float and its significance. I don't want to go back to that, but I want to pick up something you said in your reply about the need for a strong performance. And I'm going to read it back. You said, with strong performance through 2020, float was still achievable at a significant valuation above that which Fujitsu had invested. And you'd stand by that. A strong performance.
That's what I said
was
earlier.
important, wasn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, others have looked at the period before May 1999 and how the relationships were affected by the negotiations. And other witnesses who are to come will look at acceptance in the detail. I want to look at what came after May 1999 for some of the relationships you had with government and ICA and POCL. I think you've confirmed today, and I think it was raised by Mr Henry just now, that even from early on in this process, ICL had an eye on future commercial opportunities or opportunities that might arise from Horizon. Is that right?
That's correct.
And those included opportunities working with POCL, didn't it?
That's correct.
And if the inquiry heard evidence that POCL and ICL were already looking into partnership opportunities and government tenders by the spring of 2000, would that fit with your recollection?
As a broad statement, yes, and for the strategic reason the infrastructure was being put in place, which was to provide a longevity to the post office infrastructure within the UK.
Okay, I would just be absolutely clear. Frankie has this reference. It's a document Paul 000-21470, and we're going to look at page 2, halfway down the page. I'm not pausing on the first page because this isn't a document I'd expect you to have seen. It's the Post Office Board minutes from April 2000. And if we can highlight point 6 there, which begins Horizon underlined. Horizon rollout continued with over 4,500 offices installed with the equipment. The Post Office was involved with ICL in a tender to provide electronic government services, me.gov, in which the automated post office network would play a leading role. So, not your minutes, Mr Todd, but that would fit with your recollection that you were starting to look into new commercial opportunities arising off the back of Horizon in spring 2000.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't specifically remember me.gov, but the print.
I don't think we need to go to specifics. Okay. Thank you. So if we can move on, whatever had happened in 1998 and 1999, ICL had not ruled out a future government business opportunity being a possibility, had they?
No. Throughout the history of the company, the government had been a big customer, and we would have been looking to continue that relationship and expand that relation in the years subsequently.
Indeed. If we can, I'm going to look at a couple of examples. There are lots in the papers that are provided to the inquiry, but let's look at, can we look at 2? If we can look at Bays 40263, please. And I'm going to look at page 2 from about a third of the way down the page. This is not a document I'd expect you to have seen, Mr. Todd. It's a document which is essentially a briefing for a meeting between yourself, Mr. Akakusa, and the Secretary of State for the Department of Trade and Industry, which took place on the 3rd of November 1999. So the 3rd of November 1999, just for chronology, going back to a really helpful chronology, that's after acceptance, but before rollout.
Before rollout, yeah. Thank you.
And we see there in the bullets the briefing points that are being given for that meeting. First, acknowledge that the Post Office has formally accepted ICL Horizon's automation system. Emphasise the importance to the commercial success of the Post Office attached to ICL and the Post Office achieving rollout of the system by the target date of March 2001. Ask for Mr. Akakusa's perspective on latest progress. Then we go on and there's a thank you for the engagement with Newton Aycliffe. Again, we've heard of that today. And then we've gone on, ask Fujitsu about their plans for developing their e-commerce capability and the impact of this for the UK. Now, despite acceptance having occurred, there was here a continuing emphasis of the importance of the project staying on track, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. It was in all parties' interest that the project was successful.
In fact, was it really crucial for ICL and for POCL that Horizon actually worked in practice?
Yes.
And perhaps that it was not seen not to work?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but there was certainly in both organisations' interest, as well as the national interest, as well as the government, that the project was successful. And what happened to your clients is, as I've said, tragic and inappropriate.
Okay. Can we look at another document? It's another example from November 1999. It's Bayes 40260, please. Again, not a document you would have seen, Mr. Todd. It's a briefing, which unfortunately we don't know if it's a briefing for a meeting with an official or a minister, but it's a briefing prepared within the DTI. And it's for a meeting with you on the 8th of November 1999. And I want us to look at, if it makes it any easier to read, it's bullet point 1. And it reads, ICL's performance in major public sector IT projects, especially Elgar and Horizon. Was Elgar another project that you were involved in at ICL, Mr. Todd?
I recall the project name, and I think it was to do with the DTI infrastructure.
Okay. As we go on, Keith Todd should be left with no doubts about the seriousness DTI attaches to ICL delivering on these. We know Horizon has been difficult for all parties, brackets. It has damaged relations with Fujitsu, the largest single Japanese inward investor to the UK, close brackets. DTI, and especially CII, as the focus for the information age, needs to be and be seen as an exemplar in its use of technology. There are alarming signs that the Elgar project is in some continuing difficulty. Now, not a document you would have seen.
No.
But here you were in November on behalf of ICL and Fujitsu, meeting with either officials or ministers and continuing to try to cultivate a continuing relationship with government. Is that fair?
With all my customers, not just government.
And at that stage, again, after acceptance and after the negotiations in 98 to 99, from DTI's perspective, it appears the relationship with ICL is one that is going to continue. Is that fair? DTI were still willing to have meetings with you and to continue that relationship?
Yeah, that is my recollection, because we conducted ourselves professionally and dealt with issues to the best of our abilities as and when they occurred. Projects, as we discussed earlier, do have challenges and issues. That is no reason for what happened to your clients.
Indeed. But at this stage, from that minute, it seems at least fair, and it was Keith Todd should be left in no doubt about the seriousness DTI attaches to ICL delivering. It was clear that those projects had to work, didn't they?
Yes.
And then if we go on again, to come back to the question I asked earlier, would any perceived failure of Horizon have impacted negatively on that commercial relationship with government?
The failure of any major national project, and I will just be very brief. You take the lottery we were involved in, was a great success. If that had been a failure, that would have damaged reputation. If Horizon had been a massive failure, it would damage the reputation. What happened to your clients?
At that point, let's not look at what happened next. In 99 and 2000, if it became known that there were serious problems with Horizon, or if it was failing, that would have damaged your continuing commercial relationship with government. Is that fair?
If that was the case.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think, Ms. Patrick, you've actually had 11 minutes now, So I think unless there's some truly burning point that must be made, I think that's it for this afternoon.
So I'm very grateful for your indulgence, and I'm very happy to shut my laptop. Thank you very
Right,
much.
jolly good. At the beginning, which now I no doubt for you, Mr. Todd, seems a long time ago, Mr. Beer, thank you for making a witness statement and coming to give evidence, and I repeat those thanks on behalf of the inquiry.
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. And that brings today's business to an end. We're back at 10 a.m. tomorrow with Tony Oppenheim, please.
Yeah, fine. Thank you all.
Thank you.